Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight at the Weitzman Museum of American Jewish History for what I know will be a vital conversation at a defining moment. My name is Sharon Kestembaum, and I am the proud supporter of Birthright Israel Foundation and co-chair of the museum. I am also the proud mom of 5 children, one of whom will be on a birthright trip in 2 weeks. And I also I have 2 sons who completed the Onward program in 2021, and they stated to me last week that it was the best experience of anything that they've done in their life. So, just want to pass that on to everyone. I've spent much of the past year thinking about how we meet this moment with courage, clarity, and commitment to the future of the Jewish people. The events of October 7th shook us all, but they also reminded us that Jewish identity, Jewish community, and our connection to Israel cannot be taken for granted. We are here tonight because the next generation is searching for meaning, for belonging, and for a way to make sense of their place in the Jewish story. And it is our responsibility to help them find it. That's what makes tonight's discussion so important and so timely. We're honored to be joined by 2 remarkable leaders who have dedicated their lives to strengthening Jewish identity and peoplehood. Dr. Zohar Raviv is the International Vice President of Education for Birthright Israel. His work has helped shape the experience of over 900,000 young Jews who have traveled to Israel with Birthright. And Dan Tadmor is the president and CEO of the Weitzman Museum of National American Jewish History. His bold vision transformed the alum Museum in Tel Aviv and is ensuring that the American Jewish story is preserved, elevated, and passed forward. Moderating this conversation is Eliza Appleton, a proud Birthright alum from 2018. Eliza grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and found her Jewish identity on her trip to Israel. She's since gone on to a successful career on Wall Street, working first in public markets and then in private equity. Eliza is proof that when you connect someone to their roots, you empower them to lead. Please join me in welcoming Zohar, Dan, and Eliza.
Such a nice introduction. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Eliza Appleton, and it's truly an honor to be here with all of you tonight. If you had told me a few years ago that I'd be sitting on this stage, moderating a conversation about Jewish identity and the future of people, and at that, being willing to skip both a Celtics playoff game and the Met Gala red carpet to do it, I'm not sure I would have believed you. Here's why. If you look at my 23andMe, I am 100% Ashkenazi Jewish. My father was born William Schwartz Applebaum on May 7th, 1934 in the Bronx. Yiddish was his first language, and he had a bar mitzvah, and his parents who both grew up Orthodox became quite secular in an effort to assimilate. By the time he was applying to his residency after med school and wanted to go to Harvard, despite being at the top of his class, he was advised to change his name so that he wouldn't sound Jewish. He became William S. Appleton. My mother's family rejected Judaism altogether. In fact, my grandmother wore a cross to hide that she was Jewish. Needless to say, I knew I was Jewish by blood, but I'd never celebrated a Jewish holiday or had any sense of a Jewish identity. That all changed in my late 20s when I was asked by a colleague if I was Jewish and if I wanted to attend a couple of Wall Street events hosted by the Jewish Federation in New York. I said yes with a little hesitation, But it turns out that I enjoyed hearing from Jewish financial leaders and signed up for the UJA listserv. So when I got an email in 2018 saying UJA was running a Wall Street Birthright trip, I thought, why not? And what I thought would be a fun trip abroad turned out to completely change my life. I stepped on the land in Israel and immediately felt different. I felt so connected to my ancestors. I saw the beautiful landscapes and felt at home. When we took the bus to Jerusalem and we were told to look to the right, the view of the old city came into focus, the whole bus gasped. I knew then that I was meant to be there. I got that bat mitzvah that I never had at the Western Wall. I picked my own Hebrew names, Leora, meaning light, for my late mother, Lindy, and Hannah, my middle name, for my father's mother who took 2 jobs to pay for him to go to medical school. I wept at Har Herzl as if those that were killed in combat were part of my immediate family. I felt Jewish for the first time, not on a technicality, but because I felt at home in Israel, surrounded by other Jewish people around my age who felt connected to the land and to their Judaism so deeply. Fast forward to today, I dedicate a huge portion of my life to Jewish causes. I sit on the Young Leadership Executive Committee and the Young Wall Street Steering Committee at UJA, and I spend a lot of my time working to fight anti-Semitism and to try to educate people about the Jewish people. I had a Jewish wedding. My 3 closest friends from Birthright all attended. One was actually in it, and 2 of them read 2 of the 7 blessings. I keep in regular contact with my rabbi, and I have a mezuzah on my apartment doorframe, and I proudly wear my Jewish Star of David around my neck every day. I owe my whole Jewish journey to Birthright, and I'm so grateful to the organization and all of its donors who have made it possible for me to go. Okay, now that you understand a little bit about why I'm moderating tonight, let's turn to the conversation. We're joined by 2 distinguished representatives from major Jewish institutions, organizations that extend the Jewish narrative beyond our community, influencing the broader society in which we live. Jewish life doesn't exist in a vacuum. It evolves alongside broader cultural shifts and global trends. In that spirit, we're honored to welcome 2 institutions that deeply shape Jewish identity today. Birthright Israel, which has brought nearly 1 million young Jewish adults on the transformative journeys to explore their Jewish identity, Israel, and Zionism. And the Weitzman Museum of American Jewish History, a living monument to American Jewish culture, resilience, and storytelling. I'll turn it over to you guys. Dan, as the Weitzman plays a central role in shaping the American Jewish narrative, how do you see the museum contributing to this evolving story?
First of all, I want to say that the Celtics are going to be fine, unfortunately. Look, it's important to establish one thing right at the outset. A national museum goes far beyond institutional borders. May is Jewish American Heritage Month, fondly called by us JAM. We're the ones convening it. Weitzman convenes JAM for the entire Jewish community in America, and it doesn't involve at all a museum visit. Our educational programs are administered throughout the country. Our digital initiatives, our online programming, all that goes beyond institutional borders. But it can't happen without the museum. It's the museum that lends authority to all the other things that we do. If we weren't the nation's Jewish museum, nobody would listen to our online programming or educational programs or when we convene Jewish American Heritage Month. So it's a misconception about museums that they are just bricks and mortar. They're not. The other thing that I would say about this current period is that there's an opportunity. I would say it's a double opportunity. One is that people currently are looking to be engaged with their Jewish identity. Some call it October 8th Jews, some call it the surge. It doesn't matter because we all know, we all feel it, it's there. More and more people want to engage with their Jewish identity. That's an opportunity for organizations like ours. But it's also an opportunity to revise our messages and look again at what it is that we're saying and how we're saying it. A couple of examples. We're in the National Museum of American Jewish History, which opened in 2010. It's not too long ago, but it doesn't address modern anti-Semitism. And that's not in any way a criticism of the people who built this museum. If you'd asked me in 2010 about anti-Semitism, I would have said, it's a relic of the past. It still exists on the fringes of the right, mainly. It's a cautionary tale. That's why we need to keep telling it. Who would have guessed that we would be facing it on a daily basis right here in Philadelphia at a bar? Story from today's paper, that people were ordering beer with a big banner, F the Jews, and it was the full word, it wasn't F. And that's just one example, but I think it's a very good opportunity to re-examine what we're saying about Zionism, what we're saying about Israel, what we're saying about Jewish pride. For some reason, American Jews are always shy about their pride. Do we need to keep on being shy about it? I don't think so. So I think it's a good opportunity that we've been given to revise the way in which we transmit and impart Jewish identity, Jewish peoplehood. Sometimes a misunderstood term. For me, it's very clear. It's the notion that regardless of everything else, there is something that binds all of us as an extended family. We have a shared history and a shared culture and shared values and a shared language, even if we don't all speak it, and a shared ancestral homeland, even if we don't reside in it. A lot of Jews, not to mention non-Jews, are not even clear as to who and what we are. Where's Joe? That's a conversation me and Joe have been having recently. And I think all of those things need to be addressed by all of our organizations, and specifically at the one museum. By the way, there are dozens of Jewish museums in America, and they're either Holocaust museums or they're parochial museums. This is the one national museum. It tells the entire story. So let's tell it properly, and let's tell it in a way that will resonate with a younger generation.
Zohar, Birthright Israel has become a rite of passage for so many young Jewish adults. At this time, questions of Jewish identity are evolving in complex and dynamic ways. How do you see Birthright helping young people find meaning, connection, and purpose in their Jewish journey? How does Birthright meet this generation's search for authenticity and belonging, and help them anchor their identity in a way that feels deeply personal, yet powerfully connected to a shared story?
Good evening, thank you for having me here. Basically, Dan pretty much established the preface for everything that I wanted to say. I'm not surprised, I know him, I know the way he thinks. But I think that to your question, and carrying on what Dan started to say, the Jewish world needs to systematically change our narrative so it corresponds with our story. The story of the Jewish people, I firmly believe, is a remarkable story. It's a story of a people who for thousands of years demonstrate an inverse relationship between numbers and impact. It is a story of a people whom in each generation had representatives throughout the world who turned the world in which we live into a world in which we believe. It is a story of a people for whom Oi is a value statement that aims to make a better world and leave something better than we were born into. We have a story of resilience, curiosity, contribution, education, philanthropy to ourselves and to the world around us. That is our story, and the same goes for the story of Israel itself, the state of Israel. With all the commotion and all the protests and all the so much trouble that we've witnessed, if you actually take a step back and look at Israel and what it has achieved because of all of us in merely 77 years of existence, it's nothing short of mind-boggling. Our story is the story of the ever-living people. Yet our narrative has for centuries been the narrative of the ever-dying people. Our narrative is deeply steeped in a rhetoric of crisis, anti-Semitism, persecution, bloodshed, terror, and war. I remember years ago meeting the Minister of Education of Israel, who asked me to come and consult over something that he wanted to do in the school system. I sat with him, a smart man, and at the end I said to him, I want to know, as an Israeli and a Jew and an educator, why is the timeline of Israel that I and hundreds of thousands of Jews like me, both in Israel and around the world, why is the timeline of Israel 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973, 1982, you see where I'm going with this? That's the timeline of Israel. So he looks at me, the Minister of Education of Israel, and says, oh, what do you mean? That's our story. To which I responded, no, it's not. These are interruptions to our story. Our story is what happened to the Jewish people between those wars, not by those wars. And that encapsulates the entire philosophy of Birthright Israel. A lot of time people ask me, Zohar, what is the magic of Birthright? I said, there's no magic to Birthright. None whatsoever. It's a lot of hard work. We think about everything that we want to deliver, and first and foremost, we want to deliver an identity formation process that is not based on reactions to threats to Jewish life, but rather inner motivation to celebrate Jewish living. Let me be very clear. I was a Jew on October 6th, and I remained a Jew on October 8th. I'm not a Jew because of October 7th. I refuse to turn October 7th into yet another hefty dish on a perpetual diet of tragedies that forms Jewish identity for all the wrong reasons. We are here to celebrate Jewish life, not to defend it. We'll defend it if needs be, but the goal is to celebrate Jewish life. And that's what we do. And you'll be amazed how this message resonates with young Jews who are perpetually brought up to defend their Jewish identity without even understanding what it is that they're defending. And when you give people the yoke, the backbone, to understand why to be Jewish, not just how to be Jewish, but why to be Jewish. What are the values, mechanisms of Jewish life? How do we sustain a Jewish identity that is not based on a perpetual diet of tragedies? Then people start voting with their feet. They come and say, I want to learn more. And we end up with graduates like Eliza. So for me, the mandate of Birthright Israel, if I needed to articulate it in one sentence, is the ability to systematically transform Jews by birth to Jews by worth. People who can say, I am a Jew, and here is why. That is our mandate. And we've been doing it, I believe, very effectively.
Wow. Really amazing answer, I know. Let's talk a little bit more about pride, identity, and confidence. So over the past 25 years, Birthright Israel has helped countless young Jews transition from a mindset of oi to one of joy, viewing Jewish identity not as a burden, but as an opportunity for flourishing, which you touched on. So similarly, the Weitzman Museum provides a space where individuals can meaningfully engage with our collective story, connecting pride in our past with confidence in our future. So, Zohar, how do you believe the Birthright Israel experience helps young adults not only discover who they are, but also understand the role in shaping the Jewish future? Whether it's volunteering, participating in a 10-day trip, or engaging with Israel in other ways, how do these experiences contribute to building the next generation?
Today's greatest need of young Jews in today's world is not to learn more content about Israel. It's not to learn more content about the conflict. For all of that, they have cell phones and they have teachers and whatever. There are two things that young people miss today the most, and by the way, not only young people, and they are the foundational ailments of social discourse in Western society today. And just to give you context, I speak all over the world, not just in the United States, and I see those ailments across the world. Number one is that our young Jews on and off campus, in their workspace, in the Western world, need to choose an identity or clarify an identity for themselves in a world that thinks in a very binary way. Either or. I'll give you an example from a graffiti that was put on Rutgers University. You cannot be a lesbian and a Zionist. Why? I have no idea. But I can promise you, and I'm talking from experience, that if I go to a Western college today and I say, hi, my name is Zohar Raviv, I'm a proud Israeli, a proud Zionist, and a proud Jew, many people will hear me say that I'm anti-Palestinian, and I never said that. In other words, we live in a world that castrates the complexity of the human condition and forces people to pick a side in a reality that is far more complicated than that. So we teach, first and foremost, we allow people to re-embrace their complexity and the need not to choose a camp, but to actually start learning things, not only vis-a-vis content, but more importantly, vis-a-vis context. Context today is far more important than content. Dan mentioned anti-Semitism. I'll give you an example. If I come and say to you a statement, like, for example, all Jews must leave their home countries and move to Israel, statement, and I now ask you, what I just said, is it Zionistic or anti-Semitic? Depends who said it, why, and to whom. The statement is the same statement. The context changes everything. And today we live in a world that manipulates statements without context in order to achieve whatever political or ideological gain it aims to achieve. That's an ailment across the political spectrum. The second thing is that we lost the ability to dialogue between us because we live in a world right now that is obsessed with parallel monologues. People speak at each other, not with each other. People don't understand that actually a voice of disagreement and dissent is a promise to sharpen your intellectual faculties rather than threaten them. People don't know how to deal with disagreement without canceling each other out. I often give this example of Rabbi Akiva, who said in the Mishnah, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love thy neighbor as yourself. That's the highest form of the Torah, and everything else is commentary. Love thy neighbor as yourself. Today we live in a world which pretty much says to us, love thy neighbor as long as he is as yourself. Unity among us is a value. Uniformity between us has never been a value. And we live in a world today that completely kind of meshed together concepts of unity and uniformity. And people cannot feel unified if they're not uniform. So in that respect, I think that Birthright Israel's ability to offer a platform for participants to actually engage in probing into their Jewish identity and associations with Israel and their own community, fully cognizant of the fact that being a Jew is your family name. My private name is Zohar. But when I say that I'm Jewish, I'm already your brother. It comes not only with a birthright, it also comes with a birth responsibility. And allowing participants to understand that they're part of a bigger story and that they have a sense of ownership over the trajectory of that story allows Birthright Israel participants to come and say, the birthright trip ends after 10 days, but the birthright experience can last me a lifetime.
It's really so true. Dan, in your new role at the Weitzman Museum, how do you hope to engage the next generation of Jews? You know, Gen Z lives, and frankly, millennials live much of their lives online. How can the museum offer them a deeper connection to their Jewish roots and provide them with a sense of belonging? And how is the museum engaging younger generations of Jews in general?
Yep. So there's a myth about museums that I've already spoken about, and that is that everything that museums do happens on the museum premises. There's a myth about Gen Zers, and the myth is that they need to be engaged only where they live, and where they live is online. In fact, the premise of Birthright, as is the premise of a museum, is that that is not true. And in fact, having been at this for many years now, I can tell you with authority that the one good way of really getting a Gen Zers or young person's attention is through immersive experience. You're not going to get their attention through all of those fancy things that they do online. That's not the road to go. If there's any chance of having a lasting effect that's truly an emotional effect on a young person, it's through experience. Whether it's a birthright trip or a visit to the museum. Now, granted, when a group of young people come to the museum, there's a certain percentage of them. I know how I was at 13. So some of them will not, right. But there are some that are looking for the thread. I would argue a majority that are looking for a thread. And you engage them through an experience. Now remember, this is a young generation that doesn't experience anything that's not mediated, right? All of us grew up with direct experience of all sorts. These are people who have no direct experiences. Put that person, I'll tell you a short story. Anu, which is a museum that I was fortunate to be part of building, it's a very technologically advanced museum. There's VR and there's interactives, et cetera. Those of you who have visited know, those who haven't, go. But it also has objects. The museum that it replaced, the Diaspora Museum, was famous for not having any original objects. Its founders decided that they're going to work with replicas. The most effective parts of Anu are not the technology. It is specific objects that tell a story. And they're effective for these young people because sometimes for the first time in their life, they're standing next to a real object. They can't go back in time, but this object was there in real time. And it has amazing resonance with young people. So one, don't underestimate Gen Zers. Two, I want to tie into something that you spoke about, and that is come in good faith. Come in good faith. We're very good at talking about how one of the core values of the Jewish people is machloket l'shem shamayim, argument for the sake of heaven. But how, do we really live up to it? I mean, even if we look at the Jewish world today, how much machloket l'shem shamayim, how much argument for the sake of heaven, how much dialogue and discourse in good faith do we actually see? Young people read hidden agendas and lies very easily. You come in good faith and you speak the truth. And the truth is that we are a family. Before anything else, it's not about information, and it's not about text, and it's not about ritual. It's about a feeling. And the feeling is that we are an extended family, and we all have it in us, or almost all of us have it in us. Locate that feeling. That's the thread that you then use to add more information so it's an informed identity. But it begins with the heart. And I think those are the two very important lessons, or I guess principles, when looking at a younger generation.
That's really helpful, and you know, I have a follow-up to this, and I grapple a lot with this question myself. You know, the Weitzman welcomes both Jews and non-Jews, and as we reimagine Jewish life in the changing American society, you know, what lessons do you hope all visitors, including non-Jewish allies, take away? And how can a deeper understanding of Jewish history, Zionism, and culture become a bridge to greater solidarity and meaningful change in the world?
You know, I always kind of cringe when I look at slogans like we're going to erase anti-Semitism and we're going to eradicate hate. We're not going to erase anti-Semitism and we're not going to eradicate hate. You know why? Because it's human nature. And so if we're going to be active in this arena, we'd better set our goals in a realistic way. The psychopathic haters, we're not going to fix. Even if we get them to the museum, we're not going to fix them. What we can do is dispel misinformation, disinformation, and myth. We can provide people with the tools that when they encounter anti-Semitic myth, misinformation, and disinformation, they'll be somewhat inoculated against it. And so we need that for our Jewish visitors. We certainly need it to combat the ignorance of non-Jewish visitors. People, for the most part, don't know who and what we are. And for the most part, if they knew, they could, to some extent, be inoculated against at least parts of anti-Semitism. Again, if they're going to be haters, they're going to be haters. But a lot of people are simply misinformed and disinformed. This is an institution that produces and disseminates information. Let's do that. Let's do that to our Jewish visitors. Let's do that to our non-Jewish visitors. So I guess that is what we hope for in addressing. I'll say one more thing. There's always discussion at a Jewish museum. So it's always the same discussion. There's no way we can survive solely on Jewish visitors, right? Not enough of us. And so how do we get non-Jews into the museum? And then somebody invariably says, let's dilute the Jewishness of this museum. Let's universalize. Let's be a museum with universal messages. For instance, if you're a Jewish museum and part of the story of Jewish Americans, a large core of the story is the story of immigrants, let's be a museum of immigrants. And let's maybe use Jews as a specific case of immigrants. And my answer to that is that I reject that notion completely. The way to attract all audiences is to create a world-class Jewish museum that tells the story of Jews, by the way, not only in America, but Jews in general. One of the shortcomings of this museum is that it begins now in the year 1654. For those who don't know, that's when supposedly the first 23 Jews arrived in New Amsterdam from Recife, Brazil. There was probably one or two Polish Jews that were waiting there, but it's another topic. The Jews didn't arrive in 1654. We didn't just materialize out of nowhere. And that ties in with what you said about looking at Jewish history and does it begin in 48? It really doesn't believe, the last article that you wrote, which I read, because it's a very good one, I'd recommend, send that article that Zohar published a couple weeks ago. The theme is Zionism is not a new phenomenon, right? It's at least a 2,000-year phenomenon. Or you could argue that it's even from 586 BC, when we were first exiled from Israel. And so I think for Jews and non-Jews, this museum, and we need to tell the story of who the Jews are. You can decide whether that story begins with Adam and Eve, or if it begins in 70 AD with the destruction of the Second Temple and the creation of the phenomenon of diaspora. Fine. It doesn't begin in 1654. And that's important for all of our audiences.
Yeah, I think, your steadfast ideologies and figuring out how to have a world-class museum for Jews is so important, and I really appreciate it. Zohar, Birthright Israel has always evolved alongside changing needs of young Jews, adapting to new realities while staying rooted in its core mission. In a post-10/7 era, when identity, connection to Israel, and global events is all shifting rapidly, what changes have you seen as necessary in Birthright's educational approach? How do you balance adapting the moment with staying focused on timeless elements that anchor the Jewish story?
That's an important question. I'll start with the good news, and that is the overwhelming majority of Jewish students around campuses in the US do not take any active part in the shameful rhetoric of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, Israel hatred, and so on and so forth. They don't take any part in it, they don't believe in it. However, and this is important for us to understand not only as educators, but also as members of the Jewish community who are concerned about the future of Jewish life. They constitute what I call a silent majority that increasingly feels as a silenced minority. And when a silent majority feels like a silenced minority, it opens a void that invites in dangerous things to happen. So there are two things that we at Birthright identified that we need to do on a strategic level. First of all, we don't deal with the radicals who have hijacked social discourse, because like it was said here, there's nothing you can do to change them, and quite honestly, I have better things to do in life than to focus on them. I want to focus on the 95% of those who want to learn, who want to understand, who are genuinely baffled, confused, and so on and so forth. That's number one. And number two is the question of how do we systematically transform this majority from a silent majority to a spoken majority. And in my opinion, the only way to do it is to utterly transform the way they perceive Judaism, not from a reactive stand, but rather a proactive stand. And in order to do that, a number of things need to change. And that was part of what the article that Dan was referring to, that I wrote about. First of all, what we're witnessing in the last few years, and with great zeal in the post-October 7th world, is a systematic attempt to utterly decontextualize the story of Israel, Judaism, and Zionism. Decontextualize it. It's an exercise in historicide. And when I ask people, Jews and non-Jews alike, who is the founding father of Zionism, for example, most will raise their hands and say Theodor Herzl. My friends, it's simply not true. Theodor Herzl is the founding father of the Zionist movement. The founding parents of Zionism are Abraham and Sarah. Go forth to the land which I will show you is a Zionist statement. We just recently all celebrated Passover, reading the Passover Haggadah. Moses, whom I always jokingly say was one of Israel's worst tour guides. I did that journey, it takes 3 weeks. But he was a Zionist. Moses was walking in a particular direction under a particular directive. When we build synagogues all over the world where the bima faces Jerusalem, that's Zionist architecture. When a groom under the chuppah breaks a glass and everybody yells Mazel Tov, that's a Zionist ritual in memory of Jerusalem. My friends, the Zionist movement has absolutely no raison d'etre unless we understand the Zionist ideal that gave rise to it 3,500 years before the first colonies, so-called, ever appeared on world history. And the same goes for the State of Israel. The State of Israel did not emerge, like Dan said, in 1948. If you read Israel's Declaration of Independence, we're right, 2 meters from here is your Declaration of Independence. If you read Israel's Declaration of Independence, there's a reason why the first 2 words of Israel's Declaration of Independence as a state, Medinat Israel, start with the words, Be'eretz Israel kama Am Yehudi. The land of Israel is the birthplace of the Jewish people. My friends, the State of Israel has no raison d'etre without understanding the intrinsic relationship between the people of Israel and the land of Israel. Many Jews don't even realize that the word Jew means of Judea. And I'm not getting into politics right now. No, it has nothing to do with politics. It's about being an indigenous member of a homeland, irrespective of the land which is now your home. My friends, when we sit at the Passover, we say, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. We don't say L'shana haba in Philadelphia. And I have nothing against Philadelphia. But there is an intrinsic need to reintroduce our narrative in a non-apologetic way and do so with the wisdom that is required in order for people not to confuse pride with arrogance. I'm not an arrogant Jew. I'm a proudful Jew. And for me, that coincides with the vision and mission statement of this museum. What makes this museum, in my opinion, very unique is that it is, unlike many, many, many others, unfortunately, centers of or Jewish museums in America, It is not centered around how Jews died. It is centered around the question of how Jews lived. And that's part of the paradigm shift that needs to happen here. And that's part of the paradigm shift which I wholeheartedly support if we wish to raise a generation of young Jews who, by the way, at this moment in history, are committed to searching for Jewish identity in an unprecedented number in our history. We have a great opportunity right now. And my friends, the onus is on us. The onus is on us. I always say this. One day in the future, all of us are going to become part of our people's past. That's called biology. We'll die. One day in the future, we'll be part of our people's past. And the question of what kind of a past we want to be to our future is a question for the present. We need to make those decisions now. And I wholeheartedly believe that on our shoulders right now, there is a path of opportunity that far surpasses the level of calamity that we have all witnessed as Jews. And that's what we need to focus on.
I'm definitely going to steal that Abraham and Sarah being the parents of Zionism. I love that. As we close, we want to focus on the idea of shared communal responsibility. Our future depends not just on individual institutions, but on a collaborative, interconnected Jewish ecosystem. I'm going to ask this question to you both. Dan, you can answer first, and sorry, guys, it's really long. Where do you see opportunities for collaboration between institutions like Birthright and Weitzman? How can we move beyond institutional silos toward a more unified sense of communal purpose? And then as sort of a part two, how does Birthright's experience inspire and complement the work of cultural institutions like the Weitzman and vice versa? And how do we catalyze a new paradigm of Jewish language, pride, and action?
Who do you want to go first?
You, all you.
Okay. So I'm going to say something in general, and then I'll say something specific about the Weitzman and Birthright. The general thing is that when I came to what is sometimes referred to as the third sector 14 years ago from the private sector, the first thing that struck me was how little consolidation and collaboration there is between Jewish organizations. It was amazing to me. I mean, we go out there and we raise money, and then we're so inefficient. And we duplicate, and we don't collaborate, and it seemed very, very odd to me. And then I realized that there are reasons why this is happening or not happening. One of the reasons is that organizations have, I guess, an inherent interest to perpetuate themselves. You know, in the market, things happen organically, but not in this sector. And so the people running the organizations don't have an inherent incentive to be more efficient and to consolidate. But the weird thing was, so I said, fine, but how about the funders? The funders in their private lives, in their business lives, all they're doing is being efficient and consolidating. Well, it turns out that funders, some of you among them, when it comes to philanthropy, you don't necessarily demand the same things from organizations that you support. That's a factual statement. It's not even criticism. It's a descriptive statement. What I want to say specifically, though, is that sitting before you are two people who actually forged, in Israel, a wonderful collaboration. Anu and Birthright collaborate strongly. From the courses that the madrichim actually undergo at Anu, and then the groups that come through the museum, and we do so because they, it's no longer me, because they're serious people. It makes sure that their messages are aligned. It took time for our messages to align. Serious people. But actually, Birthright and Anu are a very good example of collaboration. When I look at the Weitzman and Birthright, I think one of the problems that organizations like Birthright, not only them, always face, and haven't fully, I would say, cracked is the pre and post visit, right? Especially post. You know, the investment has been made. How do we make sure that there's continuity? I think the Weitzman and Birthright can collaborate on those two things. I can imagine, with a lot of hard work, that the Weitzman as the nation's Jewish museum plays a part in the process that happens before the visit and plays a part in what happens continuously after the visit. In order for that handshake to work or to be productive, it needs for us to work at it. And I very much welcome that conversation. I don't delude myself that it'll happen quickly, but I think that it's definitely an interesting prospect to look at.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that people who know me from my Birthright capacity, Margie is sitting here, and some others, and can attest to that for many years now I've been telling them, stop looking at yourselves as donors and start looking at yourselves as investors. You're investing in the continuity of the Jewish people. You're investing in the thriving existence of Jewish life. And as investors, you should be far more critical about how the institutions carry forward your vision and realizing it on the ground. One of the greatest challenges that Birthright has always faced was the question of follow-up. And I want to be very honest with you. I meet a lot of investors who come and say, oh, you're doing great work with Birthright in Israel, but what about follow-up? What are you doing about follow-up? To which my answer to them is, what are you doing about follow-up? What is the American Jewish community doing? In other words, I think that it's unfair to turn one institutional success into what can become its demise if it stretches too far and tries to take a bite that it cannot swallow. In that respect, I think that what Dan is talking about, aligning our language, aligning our philosophies, and aligning our goals through such two remarkable organizations who are joined at the hip in terms of their vision for Jewish life and Jewish continuity is a win-win situation. But it needs to be pushed by the philanthropic thrust of the community who cares about these both organizations and understands that a collaboration between us is only for the benefit of everybody who is involved in it, for those who supply the resources to make it happen, and for the future and present audience that can benefit from such a shared language. If I know that the Weitzman Institute is a seamless continuation of the philosophy and the approach of Birthright to Jewish identity, of course there will be a partnership here like we did with Anu, because it benefits everybody. And I'll say something even greater than that. If we do that on a systematic and strategic scale, it will also affect the non-Jewish audiences who will now see something that actually works and would like to understand what is it that, because this is not only our challenge, it's a challenge of many minorities who ask these kinds of questions, and I think that the Jewish community in Philadelphia has a rare opportunity to become a case study that can expand on a national level, although it will be much more difficult. What you have that many other communities don't have is that you have a museum that, again, in my opinion, does it right. You have the right approach to Jewish life. And in many other communities, just changing that paradigm is going to be a very, very difficult task. And you are more evolved on that level, and I think that you should take full advantage of that. And I can tell you with full responsibility that both Dan and myself are fully committed to such a partnership.
Great.
So I just wanted to thank you both, the three of you, for being here. It was a powerful, inspiring, positive program that gives us a pathway forward that I think we all need to hear. It's also great to see two organizations partnering together, and that's what we need in this country and so. So thank you. The Weitzman is very happy to welcome you here, and we'll welcome you back again. I wanted to point out Heather, who didn't know I was going to be doing this, in the back for Birthright, if you have any questions about Birthright, and Jackie in the back over there, who, if you have any questions about the Weitzman. I think they're going to be here for a little bit more answering questions. There's plenty of food if you'd like to continue to mingle and socialize. A reminder that it's Jewish American Heritage Month, so check out the programming. It's listed on the Weitzman website, but you can also Google it.
And it's going to track you down on social media.
Right,
It's going to follow you around.
Right. So thank you again for coming, and there's more programs like this that we invite you to in the future.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic job, Eliza. Good job.
Thank you so much.